Hey there, lead the team. Welcome back. Hang on to your hats. We've got a fun one coming your way today with Godard Abel, who is the 5 times B2B SaaS entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of G2, which is the world's largest and most trusted software marketplace, which he co-founded back in 2012. Now, G2, in case you're not familiar with it, is used by 80 million people annually with over 2 million authentic peer reviews, and it's valued at $1.1 billion today. And they're a global team of 700 people. Now, back to Godard, he also serves as executive chairman of ThreeKit, a leading 3D visualization technology company, and Logic.io, a next generation configuration technology. And previously, he was founder and CEO of SteelBrick, which has been acquired by Salesforce, and also previously co-founded Big Machines, where he served as CEO and built it into a leading software as a service provider, which was acquired back by Oracle in 2013. Oh my gosh, what an intro.
Oh,
Godard,
thanks
welcome to the
for
show.
thanks for the kind intro, Ben.
Yeah, y'all, let's just say Godard's been a little bit busy. Uh, and so doing big things. But let's start with the simple question. What drives you?
I think the desire to build and create. And I do remember when I was a kid, I was growing up in Germany and went to a Waldorf school, and they really believed in natural play. And so I think for toys, I just had wood blocks. And I remember, I love building towers. And my goal was always to build a tower taller than my dad before he would get home from work. And so I just love the idea of building, creating. And I think that's really what entrepreneurship is. I think if I were an artist, the artwork would be the company. And so I get joy out of building. And sometimes a tower does collapse and you got to start over and put all the blocks back together. But I just love that process of building and creating something.
Wow. What a cool story. Thanks for sharing that. I'm familiar with Waldorf. We sent our daughter to a Montessori school here in Charleston. And while it's not maybe as open free play as a Waldorf, which I think is really cool, she did get to sort of march to the beat of her own drum as a kid. And it's still even today. Uh, I notice when she has no schedule time, she creates things. She will get all kinds of different boxes and cardboard and stuff and tape and just start making stuff, even at 12. And I love the fact that you shared that's what she gravitated towards as a kid. And I guess it's played out at least 5 times as an adult in 5 different businesses where you're still building that tower.
Yes. No, I think it is a great creative expression. And no, glad your daughter's on her way to being a wonderful creator.
There you go. I will relay that message to her today too. She will get a real kick out of that. In fact, she just made she got really interested in vending machines.
Wow.
And so she always boxes and she made these a fairly large vending machine and she made stickers that would come out of this thing. And her neighbor started doing it with our neighbor started making one with pet treats after that for her dog. So you can see we're up to big things in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, she's gonna be. It sounds like she's going to be a next generation entrepreneur.
It could be. It could be. Now, for you, I got to ask you about a documentary that you were just featured in, and so for the listeners, Godard, which is featured in a documentary called "Spiraling Up," spotlighting startup founders on their paths to become unicorns, and it was I guess produced by HubSpot and LinkedIn. And so I find this thing in our research and I go to it and I expect it to be sort of a chest pounding, I'm conquering the world documentary. And let's just say Godard he doesn't go that way in his. I'm getting a chill talking about it. It's very vulnerable. You don't put on the glitz and glam of a co-founder CEO, and you really let us into your world. What inspired you to go that direction on this documentary?
Well, one, it felt natural, to share also all my challenges being an entrepreneur. And I did mention in the beginning, I love being a builder, a creator. And I do think for me, while ultimately the companies came out successful, I think there was always a lot of fear, anxiety, self-doubt along the way. And so I enjoy, sharing my own genuine experience, and also hopefully it can help and inspire some other entrepreneurs, because also most entrepreneur friends I have, we almost all struggle. I think you hear like the Mark Zuckerberg story where apparently he launched Facebook and everyone at Harvard was using it overnight. And at least then for a few years, he had nothing but up until the right success. And I think that's like 1 in a billion. I think for me, my ventures have been oftentimes years of struggle, self-doubt, fear, uncertainty. But then I also think the ultimate joy and strength comes from overcoming that, from persevering and doing that together with our team. So I thought it would be, hopefully helpful to share that more authentic story, because I think most great, endeavors in life, they do involve struggle, they involve fear, they involve uncertainty and doubt. And that's part of certainly my experience as a human, and I think almost all of us. So I thought it would be enjoyable to share it. And I do have to say, Andrew Morgan, the filmmaker, the film producer, he and his team, they followed me around for about 3 days. And I also didn't see the final cut until we launched it together last Tuesday, and they just did an amazing job. I think also telling the story. And I'd never really seen filmmaking from the inside like that, but you realize, wow, 3 days of work to come up with 16 good minutes. And they did I thought a good job telling the story, where even my kids, and they're all teenagers, and we were talking at the beginning, you have a daughter, she's 12, she might not be there yet, but usually teenagers, it's hard to impress them as a parent, and they really enjoyed them.
They enjoyed it.
That to me was the ultimate validation that even my kids liked it. And they're like, oh, wow, Dad, you are doing some cool things.
Well, yeah, Dad. Okay. He's more than just the working guy. There's a little more to him. Yeah. I think it just really surprised me, because that's not what, you think about when you say, hey, you're a $1.1 billion valuation, and he looks like you're just hitting home run after home run here. And hey, you're like, no, this video is not about that. It's about really what I felt like was seeing someone talk about what success looks like on the inside, and how you get there, and how you can be in the world from that. And I think I really strive for that perspective in a lot of our interviews on Lead the Team, because I think that's ultimately how you help people, is you show your vulnerability. And we when I went through coaching training years ago, my mentor said, Ben, we all coach from our own wounds. And I felt like you were sharing some of that through that experience, and you're going to help a lot of people, because you were helping us through your own wounds there.
Yeah, thank you. And I do, and part of what I talk about in the documentary, I have been working with coaches now, for the last 15 years. And actually my coach, Sue Heilbronner, she's also featured in the video.
I saw that.
And I have found that to be very helpful. And I do think, good coaches, as you said, they kind of coach from their own wounds, but they're also willing to be vulnerable, and they help you just kind of realize and accept, that feeling. I think we all have still, that we are somehow inadequate. I know I still have that feeling every day, even when, outside in. And I also I build a brand as a successful entrepreneur. I enjoy that. It helps my business, but it doesn't mean that day to day, I don't still have a lot of, doubt, anxiety. And, but then, hopefully showing people how you can accept that and, use it as some ways as fuel to create. I think that hopefully can help many people have more impact from their own lives.
Yes. So go there for a minute and tell us about Jared.
Yes. And my coach, Sue, talked about Jared. And one of the things my coach, Sue, she's a conscious leadership coach, but she also worked with my whole leadership team. And we actually did a leadership offsite here in Boulder. And she had us do what she calls persona play. And, because we all adopt different personas. And for me, sometimes it could also be the brash, successful entrepreneur. But then, I also have this persona, Jared, that one of my team members, I think it was actually Brittany. She's our brilliant, head of our new businesses. And I think she just kind of named me because I will go what my coach calls below the line, where I get angry and righteous. I'm just convinced I'm right and very attached to my idea. And then, sometimes, frankly, the bad side of Jared, as Sue said, Jared can be a real jerk. Where sometimes also then, because I'm so convinced, Jared's so convinced his idea is right that he'll even belittle people and, just to like get his way. And, but it was really helpful. Brittany's like, "Oh, you're Jared." And just naming that persona. And what I love about it, she's also, much earlier in her career, but that she also had the courage to do that. And, and it stuck. So now I can be reminded, when I'm being my team can just say, "Oh, wow, there's Jared." And it reminds me, whoa.
He's kicking butt and taking names. Okay. I think we see little Jared coming out.
Yeah. But sometimes the problem with Jared is he shuts people down, and so that can be a good reminder for my team, because I think what I've learned from my coach, if you want to co-create, being that bombastic entrepreneur that has all the answers, honestly, is the opposite of helpful, because then you shut down your team. We have that meeting, there were 8 of us meeting. And obviously, I think, what I'm trying to shift to is more co-creation. And if I can let all 8 of us create together, it's going to be much more powerful than, even if I have the best ideas in the world, than just me, kind of dictating. And so that's one of the learnings from the coaching. And, but now I think it's helpful that people can name Jared, including myself. And then hopefully I can shift more quickly back to going what my coach would call above the line, back to co-creation and presence, versus to kind of righteous attachment to your own idea.
So when in your journey, so it looks, looking at your journey, you hit a lot of home runs or grand slams, really. Is selling your company, creating them, selling them on to other organizations, doing the same thing. When in your journey was the moment where you realized, the way I've been operating, it looks like it's delivering a lot of external wins, but I'm not I don't feel good internally. I'm having, whether it's mental health, issues or whatever it happens to be. I'm really curious about that moment of inflection of how you realized it just wasn't really working, even though it was working in so many other ways.
Yeah. And I think it took me about 8 years. And, when I was building my first company, Big Machines, which ultimately was acquired by Oracle, ultimately success, but it was so many years of struggle. And I remember 3 years in, we were literally almost bankrupt. And, my first year I'd raised $20 million. And, when I started, I was like 27, 28, just fueled by adrenaline. And like a lot of young entrepreneurs, I thought, wow, within 1 year, I'm going to change the world, take this company public, right? I'm invincible. Yep. And that was all kind of ego attachment. But then I got very humbled, because 3 years in, I was literally almost bankrupt, and had to cut the company down from 70 to 20 people. And I honestly didn't know if we were going to survive. Luckily, my co-founder and I persevered. And in hindsight, we were also ahead of the technology curve. We were building cloud software to help manufacturers sell products online way back in 2000. And there was that dot-com boom. And for a year, all the investors, everyone thought internet was going to change the world overnight. And then we learned the hard way. It was actually much slower change. And so our business was ahead of the curve. We were burning too much money. So it was a really hard reset. And also for me emotionally, all those years, I just felt like I was failing. Because I think for 6 years in a row, I missed my sales plan every quarter. So it was extremely humbling. Yeah. And then 2007, 2008, we suddenly started having success, because all of a sudden cloud software became popular. We partnered with Salesforce.com as well as with Oracle, and they really popularized cloud software. And all of a sudden, as their partner, we started having business success. And, but I still, I knew I wasn't happy. I wasn't healthy on the inside, because, and frankly, I was about 30 pounds heavier, because I was stuffing my anxiety oftentimes at night. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, I was just so stressed, and the feeling of stress couldn't go away. And so I, try to solve that by eating too much, drinking too much late at night. And then I wouldn't go to bed. I'd just be working on my laptop, kind of falling asleep on it. It's like midnight. So I just wasn't taking care of myself in any way, and I didn't feel good. And I did have some short highs when we would start winning, and, you had that sales kickoff. We crushed our numbers. I would feel great, but it wouldn't last. And on the inside, I was feeling somehow incomplete. And then luckily at that time, I joined a YPO forum. And YPO, it's Young Presidents Organization, wonderful organization. I recommend it to all entrepreneurs. So it really helped change my life. And I joined a forum, which I didn't know it at the time. And honestly, I didn't really want to. So I'm like, oh, I'm so busy and, meet 4 hours once a month. I'm like, that's too much time. I don't have time. But I met this peer group of entrepreneurs, and a lot of them were more seasoned than I was. They had more experience. And I remember one of them, Jordan Dorfman, like as I was thinking about joining, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and he's like, Godard, we can help you. And I honestly had no idea what he meant, but I was like, but I knew I wasn't happy. So I'm like, hey, why not give it a go? And then luckily for me, they had this very authentic group. They'd been working on conscious leadership, and they started challenging my mindset and also introduced me to a coach, Jim Dethmer, who, conscious leadership guru, and, who really kind of put me on the way to growing as a human and changing my perspective on the world.
So what do those meetings go like with these other CEOs? I know in your documentary, you're getting, some feedback, or you're in a conversation with the CEO of, I believe, Celestial Seasoning.
Yes, he was the founder of that. And
oh, okay.
And later he was on the board also of Whole Foods, and he's just a remarkable man. He really, entrepreneur and much more seasoned than I am, but he's in my current forum, but he's one of the leaders I can now learn from.
So you come in there and you sit down with these other leaders, and what's happened in those meetings that has been so helpful for you?
Well, parties sometimes honestly they just kind of laugh at you.
Okay, give me more than that. That sounds good though. Good start.
And I think sometimes, and we always start with an update, each member of the forum, and usually it's about 8 people, and we start with like a 5-minute update. And it's supposed to have, 3 chapters where you tell what's going on in your business life. But I think equally we spend time on what's going on with your family life and what's going on with you as an individual. And, but I think sometimes I chuckle because I think at the beginning I was coming at it very much from like a victim consciousness, I'll call it, where I'm like, oh, my board, my board is so mean. They don't understand me. They don't understand my business. They're giving me advice. My wife doesn't love me enough. And, she's not giving me all the affection I want. And my kids, they won't listen to me. Like that was probably a lot of my victim consciousness, like the world is happening to me. And then, but I think having, and then sometimes you kind of just need someone to chuckle at you and be like, whoa, like, and then help you like reframe your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's something also this forum and the coaches have talked about, kind of shifting from a to me mindset where like the world is happening to me and I'm a victim, of my bad employees, my ununderstanding investors, my spouse that doesn't love me enough, to like, hey, buy me. How am I creating this reality?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a powerful mental shift. But I think you also need some people that are willing to call BS on you, rather than like oftentimes being a good friend traditionally could be defined as just listening to you, like, oh, Ben, I understand all your problems. And yes, the world is so hard and I feel your pain. And that's good to show empathy. But then also I think being able to challenge someone and being like, hey, Ben, I hear you, but your world's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Like you have a beautiful bow tie, beautiful wife, beautiful daughter. You're living in Charleston. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, hey, snap out of it, right? And you can always, it's more looking at it glass half full versus glass half empty. But I think that mindset shift, and Ben, like, hey, you can create your own world. You can create your own reality. And I think if you can shift to that mindset, and I don't do it all the time. And my coaches also say that's normal. Like you shift back to below the line to kind of this victim state or this controlling state. But then if you can remind yourself, oh, wow, I can shift back, to a creative state, then, I find overall you can have much more joy in life and hopefully much more positive impact.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great reminder. We all fluctuate, but we got to get back to, at some point, what we can actually do, what we can control, and find a little gratitude, like you say.
Exactly.
Find some gratitude for the bow tie, even when you forget you're wearing it, so to speak.
Now, we all have good things in our lives, right? And if we can appreciate those and then, say, hey, how can I build on this? Build on it together with the people around me. Then I do think life, becomes much more happier, and I think you can be much more creative.
Well, this is the part two to the documentary that I didn't get, and I'm wondering if you can go there with me. Godard has this amazing transformation, that the inner journey, and here you are in a big valuation, but I sense that you mentioned, hey, we got another 10 years of work here to do, this company at least. Uh, how are you thinking about instilling all this that you see the power in your own life? And I suspect there's a piece of, I would like to instill it in my organization. So it impacts their 700 lives plus their families. So maybe you're looking at maybe, several thousand people ultimately that will be impacted by this. How are you processing that as a leader?
Yeah, I think what I've done differently at this company that I'd never done in my prior companies before is also I've had my coach Sue work with my whole senior leadership team.
Okay.
And I have about 7 or 8 direct reports. So she not just coaches me as an individual, but she coaches the whole team. And I
Yep.
do believe, if I can have all of my leaders also shift to being more conscious beings, more conscious leaders, that obviously that cascades down. And then now we've added second coaches, third coaches. So then anyone at G2 that's exposed to this, that gets curious, they can have their own coaching. And I think also one of the things I've learned from Sue is you can only be coached if you want to be coached. This is not the kind of thing I can impose on somebody. You know what I mean? Even my
Yeah.
leadership. And if I'm like, Ben, you will be conscious, it becomes like mantra dogma,
Hmm.
which I think is repulsive naturally to humans, right? Nobody wants like a beat down of like, here's my philosophy and you will adopt it. But hopefully if I can model it, other leaders model it, and then people get curious about it. And I've seen that happening where people are like, oh, wow. Like, and even people I've worked with for a long time, they're like, oh, you seem a little bit more happy. You seem to be having more joy. And by the way,
Yes.
seem to be having as much, if not more success. Then I think people naturally get curious to see, oh, wow,
Hmm.
what have you learned? And what of this might I apply to my own life? And I think that's kind of naturally starting to happen. And so, as you said, hopefully that comes to all of our team members, their families, and then even ideally it shows up in our products, for our users and our customers. You
That was
mentioned
my next question.
yeah, and hopefully at some
Okay.
point the product becomes, because we're creating from a more better, more natural state, right? Hopefully even our users can someday feel it. And I will say one of the values of G2 also that's related to this is authenticity. And this is true for software reviews, right? And that's been a challenge with online review sites in general. You hear all these horror stories about fake reviews on Yelp, fake reviews
I was
on
going to
Google.
ask you about that piece too. Okay. Yeah. 2 million authentic reviews. What is an authentic review?
Yeah. And now I think it's almost 2.4 million, keeps growing. But our goal is, by authentic, we mean it's a real human, first of all.
Yeah.
Because that's also one problem on the internet in general, right? Is this a bot? Is this fake, or is it a real human writing it? So, typically we'll require you to sign up as a reviewer, Ben, with your LinkedIn profile. And for almost all of us, at least in tech and software, that's our professional credential, right? So we can validate, hey, this
I
really
like
is.
it.
We can see also, real facts about you. What industry are you in? What kind of company do you work for? All of which, is important context for the review. Like, can I trust you? And I think at the end of the day, right, the only thing we do trust as humans is peers, is each other. There is so much bad content out there on the internet, or even with AI now, right? Is it hallucinating? Is it real? And so it's also very being authentic and being trusted. And we're not perfect at it, because we do see fraudulent review attempts every day. We actually reject about 30% of reviews that are submitted because either we suspect fraud or the quality is just poor. And so, providing authentic software advice based on authentic peer review is also very core, to our mission as a company. And so, I think in that sense, it's all interrelated. And like I said, ultimately, hopefully this conscious mindset shows up in our products. So our products are more authentic, more trusted, and add more value to the user. So, like I said, hopefully it shows up in our product as well, and our users feel it.
I love it. And it's so in alignment with how we started this thing out with authenticity. and we were talking about it. And it's interesting. It's like in a world of AI, where can you go to actually validate this is a real person in a real industry and understand their perspective? And I think right now, tying it back to LinkedIn makes so much sense because they seem to be, LinkedIn is not perfect, but it is a great mechanism right now to really understand people and see what's going on in their profession and validate that they're a real person. And you can tie reviews back to it. And people, and I think it goes all the way down to looking at reviews and people's recommendations on their LinkedIn profile. See who those people are that recommended them and the work they do.
True. No, and I do think LinkedIn has probably done a better job than the more consumer, Facebook, et cetera. I think of keeping it real, and they have the same challenge. I know they have teams always, because people do try to create fake LinkedIn profiles, right? It happens. And I think even now you might have seen this. They have a feature, and I've done it, where you can tie it to your government ID even.
Yes.
Your LinkedIn profile. And I've done that because I do want, people to be able to trust my professional virtual profile. Yeah. And so I think they're doing a good job of that. And I do think, their site, also their businesses continue to do well. I think because they do have, at least for work networking, professional networking, I do think they've created, the gold standard of trust.
I hope they keep going down that road. I think they're onto something with that.
Yeah, no, me too.
Hope they keep going down that road. All right. So what's the story of the red Corvette?
And that's from one of my best friends growing up, Joe Nacito, or actually his full name, Joseph Nacito Jr. And he was one of my best friends in high school. I was growing up in Pittsburgh, or a suburb of Pittsburgh called Swickley. And actually together with Joe, I created my first ever business. And I think we were 16 years old. We just started driving. And we also decided we wanted to make some extra money. And actually, I think it was Joe's idea because his dad always had nice cars. And his dad would take him to car detailing services that would charge like $150 a car. And that was a lot of money, especially back in those days. I think this was like 1987. And so he and I decided, we could do this ourselves. But the official car detailing shops, they obviously had they had overhead, right? They had like garages and things. And we're like, we can just do this like door to door. He and I were like, we know how to wash a car. And so we just went to I think it was Costco, bought all the supplies like Armor All, wax, and all the stuff you needed to detail a car. And then we're like, hey, we just print it out. We just like, hey, we'll just do direct marketing. And we had our prom at that time, and his dad let him take his shiny new red Corvette to the prom. And we had to rent tuxedos anyway, to take
okay.
To the prom. And then we just said, wow, this will be the perfect marketing we called it Ultimate Car Care.
Nice. Okay.
And, so we stood in our prom tuxedos next to his dad's shiny red Corvette, took a picture of it. And obviously there was no digital photography, right? This was a real picture.
Okay.
Did it out and went to the print copy shop, and printed out, I don't know, like 1,000 flyers. And then we literally went mailbox to mailbox and just distributed these flyers. And one funny part of the story, we then actually got notice from the U.S. Postal Service. And I didn't know this, but it's actually illegal to distribute to mailboxes without going through the Postal Service.
Really?
Yes.
All these kids' dreams have just gone up in flames now.
Yeah. And I guess you have to, you're not allowed to. I didn't know this. I think they want you to go to
don't you use a stamp?
Post office and then pay them to distribute your flyers. And we're like, we thought the mailbox was it's owned by the owner of the house, but apparently the U.S. Postal Service has a kind of exclusive rights to put things into mailboxes. So anyway, but they just gave us a warning letter. We didn't go to jail or anything, and it kind of worked. And then I remember the big thing in the 80s was, and we were teenagers, and obviously there was no internet, no mobile phones, right? So the big thing though was teenagers still wanted to talk to their friends all the time. And the big thing was to convince your parents to get you a second phone line. So my parents had actually done that for my sister because she also liked to be on the phone all the time. And it'd get annoying to the parents, right? Where because back then, there wasn't even voicemail, right? So if your phone was always busy, it was a problem. So they got my sister a second phone line. And then I co-opted that. I put a tape voice message machine on it. that was like, as just a recording. Hey, thank you for calling Ultimate Car Care. Please let us know when and where you'd like us to pick up your car. And in the evening, I'd come home, just kind of play the voicemails, and just told my sister not to call her friends anymore. But that was how we got started. And it was a fun little business, and every weekend we'd detail a few cars and make some decent money. I think we were only charging like 20 or $40, so we way undercut the professional ones.
Wow.
But for us, it was still, hey, if we could make $40 detailing a car as a teenager, that was a lot of money.
Yeah. Well done. You never know when these sparks of entrepreneurship are going to come up. And I often think about this with founders of who were your early role models or did you see somebody on TV, someone in your house? Who are the people? And I think your dad, maybe was an entrepreneur. What inspired you to kind of get in this entrepreneurship world so early?
Yeah, I think it was my dad. And actually, same thing with my friend Joe's dad. His dad was an entrepreneur too.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was an entrepreneur, but building a very different business. My dad was building a pump manufacturing company,
Okay.
which actually my grandfather had started in Germany, like way back after World War II.
Wow.
And actually, I often think back to my grandfather's inspiration because he started his company in 1947. And he was living in Northwest Germany in Essen, which was a very industrial town. So frankly, it kind of gotten flattened during the war. And luckily for him, he was working the waterworks in Düsseldorf during the war, keeping the water supply running. And he was a very hands-on engineer. And after the war, he honestly didn't know what to do. He didn't have a job, didn't have any money, but he was a very hands-on engineer. He just came up with a better pump design to pump slurries out of the coal mines in the Ruhr Valley. And then he just, and they didn't have any manufacturing, but his brother was like the sales guy. So they'd sell a pump, they'd outsource all the manufacturing, and then sort of one pump at a time, they, over decades built a business. And then my father had taken it over, and he was also very much an entrepreneur. And the reason we wound up in the US, I mentioned that, I started going to school, Waldorf School in Germany, but we wound up in Pittsburgh because my father decided he wanted to bring his pumps to the US market. And he was trying to do it remotely. That wasn't working. He's like, great, I'll just move the family. And he chose Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I think his rationale was within 500 miles of 2/3 of the U.S. population, especially at that time between Chicago and New York.
Okay.
So, and there was a German community there. So, he moved us there. So I very much grew up, kind of evenings, weekends, talking to my dad about work. I'd often go into the business with him. And in the summer, I remember he would send me to Germany to work in the pump manufacturing plant. And so I just grew up around it, and I did.
Summer vacation.
Yes. And but I think as a kid, I just, I also somewhat idolized my dad, and I do remember that as a kid also finding it intimidating, because I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, going to go to work with my dad, and it seemed so huge. And in fact, it wasn't that huge company, but it was 100 people. But to me, it seemed giant, and I'm like, I don't think I could ever if some part of me wanted to be like my dad or even bigger than my dad. But it also felt intimidating where I'm like, I don't think I could ever be as big as my dad. I don't think I could ever do this. But it definitely inspired me to want to be like him and build a company.
So thinking about your children today and teaching them about business, how do you approach that?
And honestly, I try to not kind of impose it on them. But when they ask me questions, when they're curious about it, I will definitely answer it. But I want them to, find their own way, have their own energy. Although I have to admit, like I'm joking with my daughter, she's been inspired. She wants to be a doctor, and she's now 16 years old. But I think one of her friends' moms was a doctor, and about 4 or 5 years ago, she was at their house and she came home and said, "Oh, I want to be a doctor." And obviously that's a great ambition. So my wife and I have encouraged it. But now sometimes I'll say, "Oh, don't you want to be a biotech engineer after med school?"
So much more upside.
Yeah, and she's like, "No, Dad, I just want to be a doctor." But who knows? Maybe someday.
I've tried to be intentional with my daughter, talking to her about business, letting her in behind. I think there's a tendency for some, and it doesn't sound like it was like this for your family, but to separate family from work. And not have the work people know the family people and just kind of keep it all separate and compartmentalized. But like with your dad sending you to Germany, taking you to work, I mean, he let them come together, and it sounds like it really inspired you. And so I'm always sort of thinking about ways. I haven't really figured out everything yet in this, but finding ways to at least talk about it, not impose it, but talk about it. So she at least grows up with the mindset of business is accessible to me. I can create a business. I can do it uh, if I want to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's and Ben, I do think, and I do try to make it integrated.
Mhm.
Sort of talk about it at dinner, and I've had leadership offsites at my house. I had my
Ah,
leadership team come here for dinner, which is great to get
wow.
to know each other. But I also then introduce them to my kids. So I do try to expose them in more natural ways. And lately, what's been kind of cool, like I've gotten to speak about entrepreneurship. So recently, also I did a talk at the University of Colorado here in one of their entrepreneurship classes, and I just
Cool.
invited my kids to come, and
Oh,
uh,
yes. They get to
and they
see
do
you on the
enjoy
stage.
it. Yeah, but also, and there I was also telling a bunch of business students at the University of Colorado just my stories as entrepreneurs. And I think the professors like that to also expose them, because studying business, it's like studying anything, right? If it's just dry textbooks, it's kind of boring. But expose them to some real stories of company building, entrepreneurship, and yeah. But then inviting my kids to come along was wonderful. And actually, what I've been pleasantly surprised by, they're kind of can be surly teenagers at times, but they're all like, "Dad, that was actually pretty cool."
Nice. Yes.
Now I know more about what you do. So yeah, so I do
Well,
try to expose them to it without trying to impose it.
yes. And I
I don't
think
want them
that's
to
a
feel
very
pressure.
Jedi approach because they see college kids paying attention.
Hmm.
They're like, oh, my dad has something to say and people care about it.
Yeah, like he's not just an annoying dad, right? Like
Yeah. So
he
you
can
tell them the
actually.
same lessons in your household at dinner, or you can do it in front of another student body and see them do that. And it's
Yeah.
a much bigger impact. Making a note there, a good art. So, man, starting to wind this up. I've got a lot more questions. We don't have a lot more time for this. So, I'm just kind of sort of boil it down here. What's what's your favorite entrepreneur leader lesson to share?
Mhm. And I think my own would be shifting to consciousness, shifting to vulnerability.
Hmm.
And I do wish, and as I shared earlier, it took me about 8 years to get there. To also use entrepreneurship as a way to become more mindful, take better care of myself. And I do think those 8 years were so much anxiety, fear. And honestly, like while I enjoyed some moments of my life, overall, I was kind of miserable. So I wish I'd gotten to that shift, to more conscious, mindful leadership sooner. And so that would
Yeah.
also be why I love sharing this, because I do hope, and like I said, I have so many entrepreneur friends, and I also always feel natural connection with entrepreneurs because we've all had this common experience, which oftentimes is daunting. And so if I can help inspire more entrepreneurs to shift to more conscious, mindful company building sooner, that would make me really happy.
Well, you're doing it through this interview here. Well, I've got a bonus question for you.
Okay.
Anybody that watches that documentary, they're going to see you working out like a champ,
Mhm.
like you're training for the ring or something. And I was like, man, I got to ask him about this. What is your workout regimen, and and how important is it for your functioning and high level leadership?
Yeah. And I think it is one of the things I've learned. It is very important to me. And I do work out literally every day of the year because I do find it's one of the methods in terms of relieving my own anxiety and
Hmm.
even just kind of prioritizing self care. So I do work out, at least 30 to 60 minutes every day. And because I have found it just, relieves a lot of my work and mental anxiety and just puts me in a better place. So I do prioritize it. I even have my assistant schedule it now,
Okay.
one of what I call kind of a peak activity. And, on some days also I enjoy going outdoors. Could be a hike, right? Could be a trail run.
Mm.
Some days I just grind on the Peloton. But stimulating my body every day is important to me, and I think puts me in a better mental, physical, spiritual place.
Mm. Wow. Good. Thank you for coming on the show today. And I mean, you've loaded it up. I mean, working out, mindfulness, conscious leadership, some great stories, and looking forward to sharing it with our audience.
Yeah, Ben, thanks so much. Really fun conversation, and appreciate you sharing the story.